45.
Looks like Tom Duncan.
Sounds like, must be a duck.
Jersey girls are the best.
Yeah.
What?
The bunny ears are back. All right, everybody. Welcome back to, I like to call a special edition of Laugh, Learn, and Meet the podcast, because unlike our normal podcasts, which are laughing and funny talk and all sorts of slap-happy stuff about the mortgage business or marketing, we're going to try to dive into a little bit of this proposed NAR settlement that just came out a few days ago, and brought in some subject matter experts to help me dissect this stuff, because my brain is just not big enough to handle this. So I got my good friend Gabe Gillen, EVP of Family First and Annie Mac. How you doing, Gabe?
Hey, how are you, Fob? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And then representing the realtor side, we got none other than Jeff Lobb, Spark Tech Media.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks, Bob.
Man, thank you for doing this, Jeff. I know we had a little bit of scheduling conflict last week or something happened, but
We did.
back out here and we're trying to make this thing happen. So I guess we can just kind of dive into this. I mean, Jeff, you've got more of the realtor experience here, you know what I mean, than Gabe and I both combined, right? So, I mean, because you were a realtor.
Yeah.
You know how realtors are reacting to this NAR settlement probably better than Gabe and I do. I've only spoken to a few realtors. Some I felt were posturing, and some I felt were like losing their mind for no reason.
Yeah.
What is your general feel? I mean, let's talk about this. What is the NAR settlement? Let's talk about that for a second. What is the NAR settlement at this point?
First of all, it's a proposal, right? So it's not settled yet, right? So I think there's a common theme of being really disturbed about seeing the reaction to this. It's the amount of online chaos, and maybe it's on video, but mainly in a lot of the Facebook groups and Instagram. The chaos that I have seen take place over this proposed settlement has been the most ridiculous thing I've seen in a long time, to where people are literally yelling at each other, cussing at each other, and telling them they're wrong when in fact they're wrong, and the wrongness keeps flowing. Wow. So I've never seen such misinformation transfer over such a short period of time, when it really doesn't have to be this at all. It's really a simple.
Yeah. So keep that word for a second, Jeff. Let's simplify the NAR proposed settlement that they're trying to do. We know that the original judgment back in October was for $1.8 billion.
Yeah.
Which I believe was in the state of Oklahoma, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to come back and saying, hey guys, take $418 million, right, guys? $418 million?
418.
And here's some other things we're going to do to kind of balance the field, or we're proposing to do. So is there a simpler way to explain that, Jeff? I mean, I get caught just thinking about it right now in my head.
I mean, look, the reason we watched all the other larger companies settle, right? And we know sometimes when you get into these legal battles this big, you could actually win the game, but lose 3/4 of your revenue to win. So what do you really win? So sometimes settlement, whether it's maybe not good for the public eyes, is a huge way to continue operating and not lose all your capital. Because sometimes to win the war, sometimes it's not the way to do it. So, when they settled, people are getting so hung up on details because the media, meaning the public media, has portrayed this in such inaccuracy, which is causing consumer confusion. It's now trickling down to agent confusion. And let's face it, a lot of agents at large don't always have the right information coming through their brokerage. So they're relying on what? Online media, which has also been dramatically wrong. So just way too much at one time. And there's an easy way to simplify it if and when it gets done. There's an easy way to simplify it. And this does not really change much of what we've been doing. So we can cover that down the road.
Yeah, let's jump over again. I love what Jeff is saying about the confusion. You know what I mean? Consumers, realtors, media. Is there confusion on the mortgage side over this?
Yeah, I think there is. I think people don't know, what when I say people, loan officers or companies, that have been investing in these buyer leads and these co-marketing with buyer's agents, right? Like, what's that landscape going to look like? So there's a lot to be seen. I mean, we are, like Jeff did say, it is proposed, right? So a lot can happen between now and July. And I mean, that would be the earliest date. Another thing that I just wanted to throw in there, that when Jeff was mentioning, the settlement, and you mentioned, Fabi, it's about 25% of what, the court sought, right? So one thing to think about, companies and organizations like NAR, they have insurance for stuff like this, right? And at a certain point in time, the deductibles are paid, and then the insurance company steps in, does their part. When that money runs out, and when it gets closer to running out, they have to make a decision, right? Because then it's just going to be like a long, bleedy road, right? So I think that's also important to know, is that this may be a business decision as well, or try to save a business kind of decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's that sexy 2-second blurb that everyone's talking about, right? This is the sexy thing that gets everybody, right? Commissions are going to go down to 0. You're no longer going to pay 6% commissions anymore. It's over, right?
See, yeah, that's where most agents are making. And when I say agents, the agents that are making big mistakes by saying too much. Unfortunately, social media is being very damaging right now, because people who don't know anything about anything are saying things, and it's not right. So there has never been ever a standard commission. They're using the term, I want to get paid my standard commission.
Huh.
Now, mind you, there may have been offices over the years, and this is a true statement. There have been offices over the years, brokerages or brands, that may have said, our office policy states that you don't come in less than X commission. Okay. That might have been an office policy. But by law, now we're not talking even NAR, by law, commissions have always been negotiable. So once people get into a norm of doing things, it's just perception of just how we do it. And anytime some significant change comes along, it seems to disrupt it. So this will be a disruptor, but this is the way we probably should have done business anyway, by having buyer agency agreements to secure loyalty from a buyer, to make sure you're going to get paid, to have more transparency with a buyer. But people felt uncomfortable because there were agents out there, and still to this day probably, saying, you don't have to worry about paying me. It's free for you. Things free.
Right. I get paid by the seller.
You get paid by the seller. Right. It's free. Don't worry about it. No, you can work with me. It's not free. Nothing's free. Your time isn't free. And that's a real estate agent sales problem. We should have never been saying that anyway. Right.
Yeah.
So
could you imagine your loan officer saying, don't worry about this. I'm going to do the loan for free.
Yeah. The bank's going to pay me. My boss is going to pay me.
Hey, I mean, think about 2008. Okay. Remember the meltdown, right?
Yeah.
I think you and I were talking about this last week, kind of like, right? Let's just rip the Band-Aid off here. I think we're all warmed up now, right?
Yeah.
So you and I were talking about 2008 last week, right? And how the media was portraying mortgage lenders as, the redhead stepchild of the American recession, right? It was all us. And so we fast forward to 2024, and it feels like our realtor brothers are now on the other side of that.
Yeah,
is that a fair assessment? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be changes, right, in our industry, and when those changes come, we have to adapt. And it's easy to portray somebody as a villain and that they did something wrong. And quite honestly, if this settlement's agreed and policy does change, then great. Hopefully, it's for the consumer's benefit, right? But a lot of these videos and a lot of these other webinars, and like Jeff was saying, the commentary in Facebook and Instagram is portraying something absolutely the opposite of that, right? They're actually portraying a higher cost to borrowers. They're actually portraying a less supported or less represented buyer, right? And they're even kind of portraying how this is going to affect some of the most protected classes, the low to moderate income, who are scraping together a down payment. Right. And now they're going to have to scrape together or find another means to how they're going to pick up another, whether it's 1%, 2%, whatever it is, in a buyer's agent fee. So it always comes with good intentions, I believe, or I hope. Maybe that's the optimist in me. That when these rules come out, these changes from the people way above my pay grade, but it is interesting, just like in 2008, when you portray such a problem and you make people look like villains, you know, that may not always come out to be the truth in the end, I guess is my point.
Yeah.
Right? I think when the dust settles, it'll be interesting to see what this exact impact is and who gets hurt from it.
So the question is, if what you said is you're hopeful that this is a good thing, right? And there's no ill will intended here. I mean, what could be the ill will in something like this? I mean, I mean, who wants to put? I mean, both of you guys can answer this, right? Who wants to put realtors out of business? I mean, I don't know anyone who's got a vendetta against realtors. I can see loan officers, but I've never seen like realtors.
There's a lot of naysayers. Look, we went through a lot of this change stuff when we were in a different market. And if you remember the days of Foxtons and 1% this and 2% that, we went through, but the shifted market, right? You know, that market was a whole different world. You know, the reality is nothing, and let's just clarify, nothing says in any of this proposed settlement that the seller can't still do exactly what they've always done and offered an incentive out. They just cannot put it on the MLS or its affiliated sites. So I'm sure if and when it gets settled, there's probably going to be at least 2 dozen to 3 dozen clarifying questions because, well, where can you put it? What's going to be allowed and not allowed? What do you do with a VA buyer that's not allowed to pay? There's going to be a million scenarios, right? So, but nothing says they still can't offer out. And remember, what happens when we go to a shifting market and it's a reversal? I remember, I don't know what year it was, that when interest rates were 13, 14%, and we were selling homes, and there were very few qualified buyers out there, we were taking like 7 or 8%, 7% listings and offering out to the buyer's agent over 4% to incent them to please bring us a qualified buyer. Like that was discussed with the seller. I wasn't keeping more. I was saying, look, we need a qualified buyer. So it's always been negotiable, but it does go for those that haven't been in the business that long. There's a reversal sometimes when the market shifts and there's too much inventory or things become more unaffordable. You might have to offer an incentive out to bring the buyer. So I think there's just short-sightedness in this and people making too many assumptions, but there will be absolutely the same exact rules other than just where we put the shared commission, if that's the case. And I'm sure there will be 20 other solutions that'll solve that problem.
Gabe, correct me if I'm wrong. The SAFE Act, didn't that kind of like say, hey, no more steering because of higher commissions?
Yeah, I mean that was the intended outcome, right? And that was really what was behind the scenes and what caused that was to keep everything on a level playing field. You know, you get paid the same amount of money, regardless what type of loan product you sell, regardless what interest rate. You know, so the goal of that was to make it even playing field and to look out for the consumer, for sure.
Right. So I mean, think about what Jeff just said. If this proposal actually goes through, and you have a seller who's willing to pay 3% commission, and you got a guy in the same street who's only going to pay 1% commission to the buying agent, isn't the buying agent going to go to where the 3% commission is then?
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's a matter of where is it going to be advertised, right? So like there is money that is going to recirculate and change hands here as a result, right? You know, if you can't put it, like to Jeff's point, if you can't put, we'll pay a buyer's agent some fee or some percentage, and you can't put it in the MLS, then maybe some new website pops up. There's some new aggregator site that is controlled by somebody. 100%. And then they get advertisers who pay to advertise on it, right? I mean, somebody's going to make somebody, and I say somebody, but that's a group, right? Or group of people. Someone is going to make a lot of money as a result of this, and someone is going to lose. And whether that's realtors, NAR is losing, whether there's other people, you know, Zillow, I don't know, you know, but I've also heard conspiracy theories that, you know, the discount brokers or the brokers who will work for $1,500 or 1% to list a house, you know, that they may benefit from all of this, right? But at the same time, I've heard that Zillow is going to benefit greatly. I don't know how. You know, I can't think of it now, but you know, time will pass. But you know, because I have to assume that the buyers agents and the lenders are going to no longer continue to pay for their own data at this point.
Yeah. So, Jeff, if this proposal does get forward, does it get approved and goes forward, there's something in there that caught my attention that I thought was interesting, right? I'm sure I'm not unique. I'm sure other people have stumbled on the same thing, which is that a buyer cannot show a buying agent cannot show a house to a prospective client without having a buyer broker agreement signed.
Correct. Buyer agency.
So the buyer broker agreement could be for like 30 days, 90 days, 6 months. I don't know. I didn't see a time limit on that.
Mm-hmm. So there's and this is where another caveat comes in. There's different rules and different laws based on different states as well. So I can give you an example. For the one in New Jersey, for example, the one that's put out by, don't hold me for the legal end of it, but I think it states that you could fill in the number, but there's literally a 3-day out clause in writing that you can get out 3 days. So there's going to be some maybe needs to change those. I'm not sure I'd be comfortable with a 3-day out. If a buyer agent signs that and we're working with me, say, for an agreed amount fee, and then all of a sudden they found a house at an open house, but that agent's willing to work for X, they get the 3-day out on me, write the deal. Like there's going to be a lot of things that may have to change for the protection of either the agent or local law. Now, I do want to go back a second because I really feel strongly about the steering part of that.
Okay.
There always has been, let's call it steering. And I know this because there's people that publicly, and this is where foolishness happens, like right now on social media threads, there is foolishness that says, if there is a home that has 0 buyer broker commission, I am not showing it to my client. Like you have to, like that is the most foolish thing to ever say and put in writing, or if it's offering less than 1%, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's first of all, it's unethical. I believe it's unethical.
Right.
And that we saw a lot of that in a shifted market when we had a lot of discount brokers, right? Or flat fee brokers. So the term steering, I'm sure there's a lot of gray area in law to defend steering, but at the same time, to say that you wouldn't show your own customer, is that whose best interest is that in?
Sure.
I would say, and it's not definitely the clients. So what you're going to find is the clients are going to get savvier because they have access to all the tools, and they're going to say, well, you don't want to show me, like, I want to see this one. I'll just go direct.
Right.
And then it's going to be up to a listing agent to now negotiate how much he or she would want to represent the buy side, if allowed by law, if you have dual disclosed or dual agency, and then come up with those terms. I doubt anybody wants to handle both sides for free.
Yeah.
So we're gonna see agents make those silly mistakes where they're going to be pound foolish and say, I'm not working for free. Or my buyer said they can't come up with any money. So I can only show homes that offer a buyer broker compensation. So we're going to have a lot of people that don't know how to sell and sell value. Get Gabe.
Hey, Fob, can I ask Jeff a question? This is something that's been like,
Let's do it.
and I don't expect you to have this answer, but I expect you to probably smile a little bit. So let's say a listing agent has dual agency or dual disclosure, right? So they got buy side, sell side.
Yep.
They get an offer on the house and they're going to get 4%.
Mm-hmm.
They get an offer for $500,000. And if the person's, got a, whatever, FHA loan, whatever loan it is. Let's say they get another offer from a buyer's agent, outside buyer's agent. And, somehow there's an agreement that the buyer's agent's going to get 2%, in which case they would only get 2% or 3%, let's just say.
Mm-hmm.
Same purchase price. Without knowing the credit worthiness, the loan program, I guess some pre-approval letters say VA, FHA, conventional, 20% down, whatever. Isn't that going to potentially cause some liability?
Yes.
For the listing agent?
And
right?
Yeah, because you're going to find people that are going to try and, as it always has, sometimes try and protect themselves, especially in a lot of multiple offer situations. And this is where the broker or the broker of record needs to step in and say something like, because sometimes you don't even know how they presented it to the seller.
That's what I'm saying.
So I would have something saying, please have the seller sign off on this offer that you presented it to them, like something that says you showed it to them.
Like initial not.
Some kind of, even though you're going to find that, because the other scenario, which is right up your alley on that, is going to be if a seller now says, hey, I'm willing to pay X% to you as the listing agent, and between us, I'll go up to 2% on the buyer side for the right offer. It's going to be negotiable because that's a term now. It's not going to go anywhere at this point. It's negotiable. And if that's what they agreed to, remember, when a potential buyer's agent now comes in and wants to show, let's just say this agent just has a dislike for that agent. Just, I don't even like this one. Is there any buyer broker compensation? No, not on this one. Like, how do you know? It's not, no. And then you get an offer that, yeah, actually we can go. There's some flexibility in there for the other. Like, there's going to be some weirdness. That's why there's got to be
another lawsuit then.
There's going to be some. That's why there's details that are variables that have to get worked out yet.
Yeah, I mean, you're just setting yourself up for another lawsuit on that, guys.
Of course, but I
mean, God forbid us also you start like you say no to the African American borrower and yes to the Asian borrower or whatever. I mean, the next thing you know, you see this effect going in, and people are like suing each other over this stuff.
Right. And see, not that I look, it's in the proposal, but the one thing that did at least have full transparency was in the MLS. If it said the buyer's broker's getting 2%, that was at least agreed upon in that listing agreement. Now, you can negotiate and say, I want 3.
Right.
But that was agreed upon. At least you had some transparency to know that. In this case, I imagine it's going to have to be put into the listing agreement, but there might be a variable that says, I'll be negotiable. Let's see what happens. Put 0 for now, and let's see what happens.
So, Gabe, imagine going into a furniture. You want to get a new office chair, right? And there's no price tags. Like sit on the chairs first, and then when you find one that you like, we'll tell you what the price is. I mean, that just sounds weird, doesn't it, Gabe? What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd maybe I go to Facebook Marketplace and try to get one that's really a little bit more obvious what I'm going to pay, what's going to cost me.
I mean, that just doesn't sound fair to the consumer at all.
No, it's.
I'll share another scenario you're going to see, and I would see this from the savvier, because let's face it, the ones that are in top production right now, that are doing production and how to sell, have a reputation, they don't even care about this. This is weeding out a lot of the weakness in agency, right, in the real estate agency. But nothing says, if I went into a listing and said, hey, listen, I'm going to do this, I'm going to handle this. I'll take a listing. I'm going to take the listing at 4% total, and we'll offer out 0, let the buyer pay for themselves. Listing agents might look for more money. They might look for 3 instead of 2.5. I mean, because if they're going to put out 0, the net difference to that homeowner still is potentially a savings, if that's how they want to look at it. But, I think we're going to see both sides of that coin. The biggest problem will be, and we're going to see this happen with the buyer's agents, if they cannot have a solid business conversation with this buyer. Remember, a Zillow lead wants to see that house. There's no trust, there's no rapport, there's no knowledge, nothing. But I want you to sign an agreement. So it's going to take a while. But I'm not signing anything. And especially if it says to pay me up to 2.5% commission. So they're going to say, screw that. I may not sign it because the buyer's agent is not good at this yet. They go directly to the listing agent, and then to be confronted with, okay, well, I may not take 2.5. Let me work on 1.5. And now that double end, if it's allowed by law, may turn out to be better for the listing agent. So the listing side may see a big windfall over weakness on buyer agencies.
Yeah.
There's a lot of variables, but let's face it, most agents work on both sides of the transaction anyway. Very few are just listing agents, just buyer agents. Yeah. But the Zillows and Realtor.coms, those instant inbound leads with no trust, no rapport, no nothing, I can't show you this house until we have a consult, is going to be a unique shift to consumers.
Well, that's an interesting shift right there also. I mean, how many people do we hear about in 2020, 2021, Gabe, that bought houses sight unseen just based on what they saw pictures or videos on the internet?
Yeah, I think a lot of people did, whether it was COVID scares and, or just lack of, maybe the realtors didn't want to go there into the houses, the homeowners didn't want anybody else there. Yeah, it's going to be, I've heard people say this, I'm not going to squeal on anybody, but I've heard people say that they don't only need a buyer's agent historically to get into a house, right? They've seen it in pictures on Zillow, they've seen it on Realtor.com or whatever website they're home, listing site they're on. And, they just want to get in there and make sure that their big screen TV looks okay on the wall. They want to make sure that everything looks as it does. Right. And I think for so long we've spoken, and I've known Jeff for, probably 10 years. And Jeff's always talking about, and Jeff has historically been on the cutting edge of things. But one of the things he's worked on was listing presentations. And he gave great advice, great ideas to realtors on how to win listing appointments.
Yeah.
I think the new thing that realtors are going to have to learn, and whether they seek it out, whether Jeff comes out with some new training program or what have you, but it's going to be on how to get buying appointments or buying. I don't even know what the right word is. Buying,
like buyer presentation.
Buying buyer presentations, right? Because they're going to need to prove what their worth is, right? Because I think there's, and I'm not saying this as a negative to realtors at all, but rather, in order to get someone to pay for something that has now been vilified, right? You're a bad person for expecting to get paid,
Yes.
and this is new. It's going to hurt consumers. It's going to hurt buyers. They're going to have less buying power. They're not going to be able to afford. Affordability is going to be tougher, right? And all this is happening, to them. They're going to have to really show value in why, why they're the person to go with. What value do they bring? How are they going to make this experience better? How are they going to optimize their investment? What have you? What's their team look like? What are they going to do? So, again, with change comes opportunity, right? There's going to be, I think we're going to see a lot more advertisements about buyers' presentations, and there's probably going to be new vendors that are out there selling tools that are going to help with buyers' presentations, and it's going to change the dynamic.
I mean, there's definitely vendors that are thinking about if the settlement goes through, what tools are the realtors going to need moving forward, right? Because I'm sure there's going to be some legal testings going on, just like we did in the mortgage business after the SAFE Act. Think about the cost of originating a loan post 2010 versus pre 2010. I mean, it's a big difference. So I think Jeff is actually dying on live on the anybody dying on the podcast. Good for ratings. I like this.
right on line.
So Jeff, if the settlement goes through in July, or a portion of it, or some similar way that this is structured, I know we keep talking about the negative impacts. What positive impacts to the agents does this present? There's got to be something positive here, right?
For the agents that are savvy and sales oriented and have the skill set to do it, sure, they're going to win all day long. There was two sets of impacts that were happening. We had all of the real estate agents not get in during that COVID era, that because licensing was just take a test, and they didn't learn the business, so they were starting to struggle anyway. And that's where NAR was taking a bit of a dip. There were huge predictions of NAR losing how many subscribers.
Okay.
Now this a little bit, because I've already watched people online say, I'm too old for this crap. I'm not changing anymore. I'm retired. I'm done. I'm out.
Right.
I'm out. I don't need to learn anything new. So you're going to find a lot of these part-timers just turn into referral agents and not want to have to learn and try and convince anybody to do anything. So it's going to weed out hundreds of thousands of agents. So the positive would be more opportunity, more inventory for those that are, sustainable in this business and have systems and have sales training. I mean, let's face it, when you're a real estate agent and you pass the test, besides what training your broker gives you, no one teaches you how to sell. No one teaches you how to present offers, other than filling out the boxes and what to put in there. How do you have conversations and consults with a buyer to get them to understand, just like a listing side of things? So, the buyer consult, there'll be, I already know there's tons of trainings out there right now hitting the market. There's a couple technologies that actually were even being built from last year, seeing this coming. Can't disclose them yet, they're not launched, that are going to make a boatload of money. But buyers agents, if you're working with there are some people, let me make this point. There are some agents that might be just door openers. That's all they are. They have no information. They didn't do their homework. They got a piece of paper in their hand and they're reading off the piece of paper. And then there's the same licensed person that knows everything about the mechanicals of the house, that knows the property boundaries, that does their homework, that's looking out for septic and underground oil tanks, that knows how to negotiate inspections. So all realtors or all real estate agents are not created equal, just like the mortgage business, just like the attorney business. And we have to look at it that way, is they're not just all equal. So you're going to have to hire the one that's going to represent you most. It may not be your brother or sister's friend, because they don't have it to be able to help you do this through this transaction.
Yeah. Gabe, as far as like consumers are concerned, do you think there's a positive effect to the consumers on this?
So I guess from a seller's perspective, right?
Mhm.
The seller doesn't have to pay for the buyer's fee. I mean, at the end of the day, it all works out. The buyer's agent fee, I should say. At the end of the day, it comes down to affordability. So if a buyer only has $20,000 and 5 of it has to go to a realtor, the buyer's agent, and they have 15 left, that's going to impact the purchase price, assuming that there's not competing offers, right?
Mhm.
So I can't picture, and I'm sure this will be recorded. You'll come back in 5 months when, if and when this settlement goes through, and you'll say, "Well, Gabe, why did you think of this?" Right? but I can't think of a benefit to the consumer.
I mean, wasn't the
Based
original
off of what I know, I just really can't yet.
wasn't the original premises based on that the commissions have artificially inflated the value of properties? Was that not the original premise of this lawsuit?
Someone may say that,
Right?
but it's housing supply. I mean, if you eliminated all realtor commissions today, there's still a shortage of houses. Homes
Yeah.
are still going to appreciate.
So
You know?
by
Pay
reducing
mortgage guys even more money.
right,
Homes
so
are still
by
appreciated.
reducing 3% off of a $300,000 house, they're taking 6,000 or 9,000 off, right? That's $9,000. So initially they're saying that house instead of 300,000 goes for 291,000.
I would say in a stable or in a oversupplied market, I would understand, and I would say that's logical. Yeah.
But on the mortgage side, 300,000 versus 291 is not a big deal to us.
No, I mean, to a lender, I don't think so.
That's what I'm getting at, is like the monthly payment is not affected that drastically. I don't know what the numbers is, maybe like $40, $50, something like that.
Yeah, not even
Yeah,
close to that. Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm just thinking extreme numbers. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, I think you're going to find some, again, these are going to be tons of questions that have to be clarified. You're going to find some buyers that say to their loan officer, "Hey, can I just finance in my commission?" And I don't know the legalities of that from the mortgage side. Could it be a part of the closing cost? I don't know. Is that something you would know, Gabe, offhand?
So what's interesting is, and we've been talking about this a lot, is it's IPC. It means interested party contributions. Interested parties contributions. So this could be somebody who's an interested party to the transaction. So it could be a buyer, seller, lender, realtor. I would even think attorney. So the idea behind it is, depending on the down payment in the loan program, there's maximum percentages of the purchase price that can be used. You hear about seller concessions, lender credits, things like that. Realtor, I don't know, rebates, I don't know what you call them there, realtor concessions.
Yeah.
I believe the numbers are, if you put 10% or less down on a conventional loan, the max is 3%. Right? So there's only so much room.
Right.
So now what this is actually interesting, and I'm glad you asked me this, Jeff. The way that law is written, the way that's written in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's guidelines, it says it calls interested party contributions something that is not customary. So something that is not customary or normal or something language like that to that area or in that state or what have you, right? So who's to say that in the future it is customary that a lender pays a buyer's agency fee, right? Who's to say that in the future it becomes customary that some of these things happen a certain way? Then there's going to have to be even more further, updates and clarifications from the lending side as to how that impacts, and does that change? Maybe the interested party contributions go up. You know, maybe the mortgages in business could just save this problem potentially by doubling all the interested party contributions. And then again, the seller's going to pay it. The buyer's going to pay it because they're going to buy the house for more. And the seller's still going to give the credit for it at the end.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're coming up to the end here, guys. I want to throw out one last question, and I don't know why. I mean, I haven't heard anybody talk about this yet, right, Jeff? But I want to.
Sure.
What's the possibility the NAR files bankruptcy if this proposal doesn't go through? And it says we're going to wash our hands of this. Can they do that and walk away and fold?
I don't. Of course, it's a tough legal answer. I don't think they can. I don't think they can. I heard some conversation about this, and based on, I think, the way they're structured as an organization, I don't think that's an option for them right now. So no, they're not going to fold. I see some of the other settlements of some of these other big brands that settled, taking huge cash hits, some of which may have to go back out to investors to raise.
Mm-hmm.
I won't be specific in brand names, but there are some that I know do not have enough cash on hand to be able to do that. So what's going to happen is they're going to go back to investors, which are going to be very skittish to throw money at this. And what usually gets cut back is people, systems, and staff. So that's going to be an impact. Even though they've settled, no one has looked at the repercussions of the dollars and cents after these settlements have been paid. It could be an issue for some large. So maybe there'll be some consolidations out of this.
That's what I was wondering. Is that the next step then, is consolidations of these bigger brokers together, or bigger real estate brokers?
Yeah. And that was only companies that are bigger than $2 billion, I think it was, with more than $2 billion.
Yeah, $2 billion is the aggregator. Yeah.
What about the smaller ones? Are they next in the class? Like, what's next?
I mean, that's really comes back to the cost of.
It was $2 billion and below.
$2 billion and below. $2 billion and below. Yeah.
But the thing is to the two, and I kind of keep connecting this to the Mortgage 2010 SAFE Act, right? Is that the cost of the origination of a loan went up so high that smaller IMBs couldn't survive, and 15 years later, or 14 years later, we're feeling the impact of that, right? Where the cost of originating loan is just so astronomical because of all the things. So how many smaller mom and pop real estate companies have been around for 30, 40 years may not be able to provide the same value as the bigger shops just because of the cost of selling a house or listing a home?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest disappointment in this whole thing is I don't know how legally we did not defend this better. It's the most obscene thing to defend there's so much supporting documentation to show, like just taking random listing agreements across the country of this one's a 4%, this is a 4.5%, this is a 5%, this is how we didn't defend this better is definitely frustrating. But yet then I heard an attorney recently at a conference last week, a nationwide attorney said publicly in front of a large group that, I won't say names, but it was absolutely a political play to get this done before elections for strategic reasons during the elections.
Jeez.
So he's like, holy crap, like what? And he used very specific reasons with specific company names in front of the audience. So, I think we just got to adapt to what it is. Let's get it filtered out. Keep it simple. If it changes, it changes. We sharpen our toolbox and we just go continue doing business.
I think that's ultimately what I want to end on, is if it does go through, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, if you're a sales professional that's been doing real estate for however many years, maybe it's a short period of time, but maybe it's a long period of time. At the end of the day, this is just another hurdle to jump over. And there may be some new ways of doing business, but people have always had to adapt. How long have you been adapting, Jeff?
36 years, 37 years. It's like, I hate to say, but change is like, I think I even said this. If you don't have the ability to change, not only in any business right now, you probably shouldn't be in the business you're in, because look at the mortgage business, look at the title business, it's changing all the time. The programs change, markets change, rates change.
But this could be a pretty seismic shift in the real estate as we know it. I mean, to me, once again, I keep comparing it to the 2010 SAFE Act, right, where everything changed over. Like that was like, it was just too much.
If I was in production today, selling real estate on the street today, I would have no fear whatsoever to handle what's coming down the pipe. It's Same thing, business as usual with commissions to negotiate from the seller side. And I got to work with a buyer now on a consult. It's not that hard of a conversation. And there may be some buyers we don't want to work with too that don't have that right mindset. So I would not be worried, but there's going to be a ton that can't handle that.
All right. Well, look, guys, I appreciate your time. I know that I called you in the last second here and put this together, but I wanted to get something out there for our audience to kind of listen to some opinions. There's going to be obviously way more discussion on this than we've allocated time for it. And some guys that are way smarter than all three of us combined that'll probably get to the bottom of this.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, I think time will be the answer to all of these questions anyway. So, Gabe, Jeff, thank you for joining me today on Laugh, Lend, and Eat. JB, man, get me out of here.
45.
Looks like Tom Duncan.
Sounds like, must be a duck.
Jersey girls are the best.
Yeah.
What?
The bunny ears are back.